Johnny, how does film fit into this? Because I know in Australia you had a film club and you did a movie with the Rolling Stones and you were like one of the, how does all of that fit into your gadgets and your sort of self-sustainability and all of that?
Well, I don't know. I think you've really got to put yourself back into that atmosphere of the '60s. When anything was possible, everything was possible. And we had a prime minister named Gough Whitlam who was finally sacked by the governor general because he was as radical as you could possibly find. The sort of guy you might meet at a party, And but there was a very and there were early days of actually it was through Bucky that we started making. When he was there, he started what they call the World Design Science Decade from 1965 to 1975, and he had this thing that we have 10 years to redesign the world, and this would climax in his sphere and everything being finished,
The geosphere.
Yeah. And so we were having left I think even before I left the university, I mean, I did about a year at university where I was still sort of really not taking much into. I mean, in retrospect, I realised I never took university seriously at all. I mean, because it was free, and I don't know. As soon as it started to look serious, I thought, no, I think, but my mate Mick, who's, like I say, my only last great mate in Sydney, we decided, there was a friend of ours, Peter, the three of us. Peter Kingston's father worked in 20th Century Fox. And 20th Century Fox, a big, they had in Sydney at that time, they had these little cinemas, they were called newsreels. And you went in and it was a loop and it went for an hour. And you went in, and it was a bit of what's happening in the world, politics. It's also the fattest lady in America and things like that, And it's full of very internetish sort of stuff.
Like reels.
Yeah.
Instagram reels.
Yeah. So you went in, and when you come round to where you came in, you went out. Sort of thing. It was just a continuous loop, and they would, I suppose, continuously. I don't know how often they changed it or fed it or whatever they did, but somehow they did that. And his father then gave us access to volumes of these black and white prints we could have. And so we thought, oh, we'll make a movie for Buckminster Fuller about his whole thing, clipping up old black and white movies. So we lived in a little shoe factory at the time, remember, Mick and I? And so we used to be able to get a thing called a moviola, which you sat on and pedalled, and the film went click, 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 click across, and then you want to stop, you cut it, and you scratched the emulsion, and you put some glue, and you spliced it. And you put together, and so what we do, we'd watch these things, endlessly watch these things, and when there's something about a dog, for instance, you clip the thing, put a tab on it saying dog, hang it on a nail, and we surrounded the whole room with things like that. And we put together, the first movie we put together was called Who Plus Lives Equals Home. It was like that, and it was an attempt to, I know, when we first showed it to Bucky Fuller, he goes, I don't know, I've never seen a better statement of the confusion in man's mind. He wasn't so sure that we were the best allies. He would get off the plane and there'd be these guys in three-piece suits, our age, architects, and and he'd sort of go with them, in their limousine, and our old combi Volkswagen van would be sort of there in the parking area. But we picked him up. Then we were able to pick him up in our van, and when he finally sort of, we were able to befriend him.
But then he became your mate, no?
Yeah. No, the classic memory I have of Bucky Fuller was because at the time Mick and I were living on a little island which was just off the coast of Australia where you crossed over with a bridge, And right beside it was the last stand of the Aboriginals in Sydney. It was a beach called Kongwong. And it was completely remote and away from, there was no, surfers or anything there. Only a very small beach anyhow. And so we took him there in his van. I mean, I remember we turned up at his hotel. There's a day after he got up and he was the keynote speaker at a thing on architectural education. And he got up and he said, architectural education is probably the greatest waste of talented people indoctrinated with what he called a neo-Egyptian anachronisms that there's ever been created. And they said, oh, thank you, Mr. Fuller. We won't be needing you anymore.
That sounds a bit like Fukuoka telling everyone why this agricultural summit is a waste of time.
Yeah. So we turned up at his hotel the next morning. They'd paid for him to be there for another week. So we turned up at his hotel the next morning. I remember sitting down, because the first time that I'd met him, he was a slightly plumpy little man. But when the second time I met him, he was really tuned, like he was, and he only ate meat. He would get, for breakfast, he'd get a sirloin steak, he'd cut off the fat and everything, he did only meat, mate.
Really?
Yeah, and he was sleeping on planes.
Okay.
He'd organise his flights so they're at night, and that's where he would sleep, and that's how he lived, and this is when he was 70s, in his 1970, he was in his 70s, Anyhow, but the classic memory I have of him is taking him to this beach, and him explaining to us some of his geometrical principles with a stick in the sand that the wave would come and wash and go back out, and that's exactly the image I have of Pythagoras, teaching his principle, his theorem to his students with a stick in the sand, and and I thought, wow, man, we're this is a moment in history, a mythical moment in history to be here with this guy, because he's left documents, man. He left these two documents, Synergetics 1 and Synergetics 2. Now, whether anybody ever gets to understand them will be a miracle, but they're just full of the most incredible, anything you pick up and read in there is suddenly a revelation about something or other. It's all written axiomatically, and it's really quite incredible.
You likened him to, you told me one time that you felt that he, if anything, he's a sort of incarnation of someone like Pythagoras.
Yeah, you could easily see it like that, yeah.